I think that I'm just kind of, I mean, I would like to believe that the Nordic welfare states are just waiting for the success, but I think that there are also certain vulnerabilities that we have, because Nordic kind of welfare states are services states, and there is a lot of interest in the services trade and the commercialisation of publicly funded services as within the welfare state. So, so the question is, where is the Nordic welfare state going? I think the other success in terms of the individual autonomy has created also the scope for more individualized choices. And I think in Sweden, the choice of services has been a very important kind of a part of the kind of reform processes. And I think that the choices agenda is likely to affect also the other kind of countries. I think also kind of it is sometimes good to remind about the specific of the Nordics, but how far are we from Vermont in USA or Scotland in UK in terms of the kind of a social solidarity and actually how how far we kind of want the kind of welfare state to function. But I think the challenges of success, of course, is one kind of important aspect is the economic crisis, and I think that what happens in economic crisis is not only just problems of economic growth, but also the problems of power shifts. Because I think that in the Nordic welfare states, and at least what you can see in Sweden and Finland, the power of kind of national welfare state policies and social and health services kind of shifted in terms of in relation to economic policies and proposals. And that also creates opportunities, because I think that the current crisis of economics creates for Nordic welfare states some opportunities on rebalancing globalisation and thinking about it. But I think that, and I think Sakari brought up well the kind of a current crisis of the kind of a new relevance of constitutional and also international law, because for my work, I come from health, but I do work in relation to globalisation and trade policies. And I think that we have got a problem in terms of how the rules are set and on what basis. Because the rule setting is part of globalisation, you often can have a meta-regulation shaping the policy space that governments actually have at national level. Or in terms of what government can and need to do. So we can have a Nordic way, but if that will be constrained by European way or global way on the basis of agreements extending much further to your services provision, then you are in trouble. And I think also in terms of the both, I think what I know a bit more in terms of the Swedish or the Finnish welfare state changes, I think that what is striking is the quietness. And yet there is a kind of there is a recognition that it's publicly funding will be kind of remaining. But in comparison to UK, I think there's been much less fighting about it. There's been much less concern over it. And there's also kind of a new challenges, and I think that comes from the kind of background of individualism and the sense of individual autonomy. And I think that the challenges is the kind of idea of individuals as their own masters, compiled with the kind of a law and order, kind of a legal compliance with new public management practices, customers, and EU legislation far further than actually other Central European countries, for example, would go in terms of their governance. And I think there's also the new freedom fighters. Why is that the Nordic countries are starting to have so many of the libertarian think tanks, and what is the role of the libertarian think tanks in their designing and argumentation for the future? And I think, it might be seen as far-fetched in the context of the current welfare state, but I think I would get slowly worried in terms of the ideas and in terms of the prospects that we have. So what could be the Nordic way forward, and how can we kind of address perhaps the tensions that we don't have a single Nordic national interest, but we may have got global corporate interest in conflict with some of the national interest or some of the local interest, and how can Nordic welfare state continue to redistribute and continue to be kind of a happy taxpayers and respond to tax evasion? And finally, I think I came here from a talk in the kind of one of the Nordic trade unions, and I think that there is a question of Nordic welfare states and what is the role of the trade unions in this process. And sometimes I also fear that is there a danger that Nordic welfare states implode or decline along the centre-left social democratic policies, because they've been so much tied to the politics of social democratic parties within Nordic countries in general. So thanks, I think that's the questions. Thank you.